Vice President Kamala Harris is getting real about her and President Biden's 2024 election predicament. Getting reelected is going to be harder as voters appear to be blocking away. In a phone interview with CNN published yesterday, she admitted that the duo are going to have to earn their reelection. There's no doubt about it.
Meanwhile, the Biden campaign is working overtime to quash anxiety within the Democratic Party about his reelection efforts amid consistent poor polling for the POTUS. Here to discuss the Biden-Harris 2024 ticket is host of the Sabby Sabs Podcast, Sabrina Salvati. Welcome, Sabrina.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So we've been, diving into this poll after poll showing Biden very much behind in key swing states. Massive dissatisfaction among young Democrats in particular over Israel-Palestine. What should the Biden team do?
Oh, dear. I think what's really interesting is I've seen a number of people comparing Joe Biden's approval rating to Barack Obama's approval rating, saying that Barack Obama was also at a low point in reference to his reelection. But I think what's important to acknowledge is the fact that when we compare the two, Barack Obama actually had 93% of the African-American vote going into his 2012 reelection. Now, that was down from 2 points from 2008 when he had 95% of that support. He also had the support of young voters. He also had the support of Latino voters. And I think that if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually want to win, they're going to have to make some changes in reference to some of the policy positions that Joe Biden has made, some of the decisions that he's made in reference to the war in Ukraine, and also this war with Israel and Gaza. Young voters in particular are not in line with Joe Biden with his decision to not call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So that's heavily going to sway some voters. And in particular, Joe Biden needs to win the state of Michigan. Now, Michigan has the largest Arab population in the United States. So if he cannot win over those voters, which he's also losing support there as well, I don't see him winning re-election for 2024.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, when you watch the mainstream establishment Democrats talk about this, they're all very hopeful that basically everyone will forget whatever they're mad at now, whether it's the siege on Gaza or the student loan moratorium being lifted. A year from now, they won't remember. All they'll remember is Trump is bad, and they'll go to the polls and their vote. But your point that you're making is that in certain key demographic groups that Democrats have historically relied upon to win, Biden is very much down. Now, the argument that folks like Dean Phillips or Jan Yugar are making is that Biden can't actually recover, that the Democrats have spoken. Nobody wants this rematch between Trump and Biden, that the overwhelming majority of Democrats want someone not named Joe Biden to be on the ticket, and there's no coming back from it. So the Democratic Party needs to pivot, allow there to be a primary, and not put the thumb on the scale against these other candidates that are in the race. Do you actually think there's any scenario in which Biden can reconstitute the coalition, dig himself out of this hole? And if so, what would that look like?
I think what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to use Trump derangement syndrome to put fear into voters again and say, well, we know Joe Biden hasn't been perfect, but do you want Donald Trump again? And I don't know if that's really going to work this time around, because we have had a Biden presidency and we have had a Trump presidency, whereas in 2020, we didn't have both. So we didn't have anything to compare it to, other than we can look at what Trump's presidency was like, but we didn't really know for sure what a Joe Biden presidency was going to be like. But I will say this is the problem for the Democratic Party, because this is what happens when you push forth a candidate that the majority of the Democrat voters did not really want. Bernie Sanders, if we go back to it, and I have many criticisms of Bernie Sanders today, but if we go back to the 2020 Democrat primary, Bernie Sanders was polling really high, multiple times polling number one among the Democrat primary candidates. But the DNC made it very clear that they were not going to go with someone who was going to push for some type of universal policies for the American people. They wanted a candidate that is status quo. They would much rather have Donald Trump win again and the Democratic Party lose than to have someone like Bernie Sanders in the White House. So what happened along the way is that Joe Biden didn't really have a strong base. What he had were voters that came out to vote against Donald Trump. So here we are. This is this time for re-election. And now it's like, where is the Joe Biden base? I don't think there ever really was one. So I'm not sure that Joe Biden can actually recover, to be honest with you. I have heard rumors that there could be a possibility of inserting someone like Gavin Newsom. I don't think that would be a good idea for the Democrats either, because just look at how Gavin Newsom's governorship has helped people or hurt people in California. So do you want the United States to end up like California? Look at where they are economically. I just think the Democratic Party have put themselves in a lose-lose situation here. But I will say this is the time where some of those third party and independent candidates actually have the ability to shine. You have multiple options that you can vote for outside of the two-party system this time around.
Yeah. I'm skeptical, really, of efforts. You said install, or I can't remember what exact terminology you use, some alternative to Joe Biden. But Biden has to go along with. I mean, Biden is the leader of the Democratic Party. He would have to basically step aside, and I don't see any way he could be convinced to do that. Why would he give up power for someone else? I don't think he's going to do it, even if it would be in the best interest of the party. I really don't.
I don't think he's going to end up doing it either. I think that the Democrats are just going to lose this one. But honestly, to be honest with you, I think the Democratic Party just wants someone in that status quo. So as long as it's someone that wins the presidency that is going to continue to help out corporations, continue to help out the military-industrial complex, continue to help out lobbyists in D.C., I think they'll be fine. As long as the Democratic Party gets the fundraise, that really is their ultimate goal at the end of the day.
Well, Sabby, as I'm sure you're aware, Biden turned 81 years old today, and there have been a lot of questions about the impact that his age is going to have on the electorate. What do you say? Like, is it only going to get worse from here? There are a lot of different problems that presidents can have, and Democrats like to say things like, well, it's just his age that people have a problem with. But unlike certain other policies that folks might object to about a given candidate or temperament or things like that, age is one thing that you can't really affect.
This is true. And there's some people that are 81 years old that are very sharp. I think that Joe Biden is experiencing some type of cognitive decline, though, from what I've seen from interviews, the way that he's performing in press conferences, not knowing who other world leaders are, walking away from conversations very awkwardly at awkward times. I think that's really what Joe Biden is experiencing. But I think, again, I really would encourage people to understand that there are other things that you can do. Right now, you have Jill Stein, you have Cornel West, you have RFK Jr., you have Dr. Shiva, you have Claudia de la Cruz. You have multiple candidates that are running outside of the two-party system. And what I would like to do is to get people to just shift their way of thinking for a bit and realize that you don't have to continue to do what you've been doing all along. Because what I really think is going to happen, I think a lot of the people that did show up to support Joe Biden in 2020 that are dissatisfied with him, instead of turning out to support those other candidates, I have a feeling a lot of voters are just going to stay home.
So Senator Joe Manchin, who's retiring, is not going to run for re-election, but is maybe weighing a third-party run, said over the weekend that Joe Biden has been pulled so far to the left, the extreme left, as far as liberal, makes no sense at all. It's not the person we thought was going to bring the country together. So I'm sure you and Brianna would dispute that he's been pulled to the left whatsoever. But if he's in a place where he's losing Manchin-type people on a perception that he's progressive, but he actually is not left enough or hasn't given substantive achievements that would make left people like yourselves happy, is he in some kind of middle ground where he just manages to please absolutely no one?
That is the case right now, I think. Another thing I want to point out, too, in reference to like those younger voters, I just saw a poll recently that apparently RFK Jr. is polling well with young voters between the ages of 18 to 34. And believe it or not, Donald Trump is polling higher than Joe Biden with that demographic as well. So there's something happening here. I really do believe this issue with Israel and Gaza is really shifting people in a different direction. And I know some people do feel like, well, next year people aren't going to remember this. I think people will continue to remember it because of the death toll. When you have over 11,000 Palestinians that have been killed, I mean, this is something that Joe Biden can do tomorrow. He can call for a ceasefire. President Macron, who is an ally of the United States, is calling for a ceasefire. I just saw a video recently where Saudi Arabia is entertaining talks with China to put an end to this. Saudi Arabia, also an ally of the United States. He can call for a ceasefire the same way that Ronald Reagan did when he was president. Ronald Reagan was a Republican. So this just goes to show you, like, we have to go back and look at history when it comes to some of these issues and how some of these other leaders that we've had in the past have handled these situations. But the world is watching you, Joe Biden. They are watching how you respond to this issue. There have been protests all across the world nonstop for the past couple of weeks. And we see that you are entertaining dinners with other people and you're ignoring this issue. I don't think a lot of people, particularly that demographic 18 to 34, are going to forget that come 2024.
Sabrina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.